So HDMI 2.0 though. HDMI 2.0, should this be acceptable in this day and age?
I thought that was pretty disappointing. Yeah, I was pretty annoyed about that.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and say I don't care.
It probably doesn't matter, but
Yeah.
I still don't think if you're buying a somewhat bleeding edge product that it should come with the previous generation of a connector.
So HDMI 2.0 is good for 4K 60, which is the only thing that you are realistically going to plug this computer into in a like professional work environment for the foreseeable future. Because if you wanted to go 4K 120 or 5 or 6K or whatever, you got your XDR display or whatever, right? So you want to plug into something else, you're going to use one of your Type-C connectors. You're not going to be using HDMI. So it's not like the laptop doesn't have the capability of driving these higher resolution or higher refresh rate displays. It's just that, yeah, you might need a special cable for it or something like that. Because it's not like there won't be Thunderbolt or rather DisplayPort to HDMI 2.1 dongles. In fact, I believe Type-C DisplayPort to HDMI 2.1. I believe these already exist. Don't quote me on that. 4K 120 hertz and 8K. Yep, here it is. So that was super easy to find. And I think that if you are one of the very few people that is going to be driving a 4K 120 hertz display off of your MacBook, this is a fine solution for $38.99. That's Canadian, so it's like $30 US. There, devil's advocate. I think from a functionality perspective, it's not going to matter to the vast majority of people. You're a professor, you do lectures or whatever, you plug into your projection system.
I agree. It just doesn't feel like complete or clean. Like I don't understand why you would bother step it down.
I mean,
when it's already on such an expensive device, like why not just give them the...
When it comes to display connectivity on this thing, it's not the most incomplete thing.
That's fair.
Let's talk about the notch.
Oh.
Now, I've seen arguments a couple of different ways for the notch. One of the ways that I've seen it is Apple's got to make room for when they add Face ID. Okay, that's a really, really stupid argument.
Yeah, wow.
Because of it, yeah, I mean, no offense, but you're an idiot. No offense, but you're actually like defective. Because if the feature is not there, then no, they do not, in fact, need to leave room for it. That's the worst. That's the worst take ever. Okay, but I have actually seen some pretty solid arguments for it. So let me hit you with some of these. Without the notch space, it is a 16 by 10 display, which is already great.
Yes.
So everything to the left and the right of the notch is bonus, and you should view it as such. Okay, thoughts?
I feel like a lot of content is going to struggle with that notch. Like what if you screwing with an aspect ratio doesn't mean that you have bonus screen space. Screwing with an aspect ratio means that a lot of things are going to feel weird on your computer. Like,
okay, all right. Now let me hit you again. This is another of the more solid arguments that I've heard for the notch. It happens to be exactly the number of pixels in height as the top bar on the Mac. Something that you're basically stuck with, except when you're viewing full screen content, the vast majority of which will be 16 by 9 if we're talking about content consumption, or even narrower. So there's another argument for that the notch is really not in the way. It's just giving you extra bonus screen real estate that you otherwise wouldn't have.
My thing is how aesthetically unpleasing it is when I'm not watching something full screen. I've used a decent amount of phones with notches on them for, to be completely honest, a relatively short period of time. And when you full screen something, especially if it would like black bar on the side or if it has a dark background, it's not really that big of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it's awkward and weird to use when I'm not doing that. When I'm doing other things, it like looks bad or whatever else. That's my main complaint with notches.
So the best argument that I think I've heard, and not the best in terms of like the most carefully balanced,
people are mentioning that argument. We need to point out that you have framework investment.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yes, I'm invested in framework. The best argument that I have heard for the notch is that for better or for worse, Apple, and this is really a big part of where my initial discussion came from, Apple has clearly telegraphed that they are willing to put function before form.
Yeah, because it doesn't look good. That was my whole.
Yeah, because it looks terrible.
It looks really bad.
And someone there has to know that it looks terrible.
And I think there's even more elegant ways to accomplish. Like you were saying, it's so big because or you were mentioning that one of the arguments, was that it's so big that it has to accommodate Face ID or whatever. Which is, yeah. I mean, you've said your opinion on that one, and I agree. But there's look at phones. There's way more elegant ways to do it. If they did like a punch hole thing, I still would have not liked it.
Yeah,
but it would have been more elegant. It would have been a better solution. Instead of this like massive block, which there's like no way they need that much space. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
laptop webcams are trash anyways.
To be clear,
I was almost wondering at a certain point when they would just leave the webcam behind.
No, because too much of Apple's product positioning is around connecting people.
Okay, yeah.
And so a lot of what FaceTime is such a big push for them over the last, when did FaceTime come out? I can't even remember.
It's been quite a while
iPhone 4S or something like
that.
It's
been a long time.
Yeah, I don't remember anymore, but it was a long, long time ago. And honestly, I'm with them. I think you've got to keep the webcam.
I do too. I thought if someone would ditch it would be Apple, but I think you're right about the connecting people thing. Someone in Floatplane Chat said, or Lazy Elephant in Floatplane Chat said, is the webcam not getting better? I believe it is getting better.
Yep.
But if you hear the specs, it sounds like it's getting better to like a 2008 standard.
Well, it depends, right? Because if you want to compare against,
other laptop webcams.
Yeah, you want to compare against Dell's extremely high screen to bezel ratio, high screen to bezel ratio laptops. It's way better.
Yeah,
than
it's
where they're at
genuinely
today.
difficult to get like nice high performance webcams in a bezel that is really small, which is why I understand why they have this big blocky thing.
You know what? I'm kind of surprised that no one's done. Like maybe I wouldn't have preferred it. Maybe I would have criticized it. But maybe I would have preferred like a tab. Rather than have the entire laptop be completely rectangular. Have the webcam be a bump.
There's examples of that's happened before. I think that was much more of a old school thing. I think Apple people would hate it.
You think so? More than having a chunk out of your display.
It's not this like perfect, clean.
Neither is having a chunk out of your display. I think if Apple presented it as the best thing ever, if they accepted a notch in the display, I don't see why they wouldn't accept a bump out of the display. Like I don't see the difference.
Yeah, I think people wouldn't like it. I think messing with the body and the external aesthetic of the computer would because they're status symbol things, right?
Yeah, but remember...
I guess, Apple could probably find a way to make it so that, like, it's a status symbol to have the bump.
Of course they could.
Yeah.
They managed to turn it into a status symbol to have a different color background on your stupid text messages. Let's get real here, right? Yeah. It's not about what it is. It's about what it represents. And if what it represented was, hey, I've got the latest gen MacBook that has this, like, banging... awesome webcam in it or whatever, I think they probably could have gotten away with that.
Conrad says, I like the notch. Think of it as giving you more screen area rather than taking away a small area. That's what Linus was just saying, though. They're going for function over form.
Yep, absolutely.
Because that argument is purely I'm getting more screen area, which is fine, and there is a positive argument for that. But that's a very kind of not Apple approach.
Except when, they pulled the same thing with the iPhone 10 and put a notch on that display. It's like there's clearly a precedent for this.
Yeah.
There's other really good things about the display. It's got the same mini LED backlight as their other XDR screens, or at least the same approach. I haven't actually looked at exactly what the performance is like. We're not hands-on with it yet, but it looks freaking looks freaking awesome on paper. It's got a high refresh rate. It's got its high refresh rate, so it runs it up to 120 hertz. And more importantly, it seems to be adaptive, anywhere from 24 to 120 hertz. That's going to be great for battery life and for, I mean, dare I say it, gaming on a Mac?
I
Hey,
don't think so.
they've got Apple Arcade. There are games you can play,
You can play
on a
mobile
Mac.
games on your Mac.
You could. I was about to say you could run Windows. No, you can't.